You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, video game movies get a Brainscan Dragon power-up. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 or to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have 2 good movies, the other 2 bad ones. Let the chaos begin. And I am Adam Thomas. Wah!
And I am Thomas Mariani, here to give you the latest disc to play, Adam.
Let me, for some reason, sloppily drink milk a lot.
Oh, and be a very tired teenager. Just look like the most tired teenager of all.
Still does, too.
Yes, but welcome to the double-edged double bill, everybody. We're both here to talk about, as we usually do, a good and a bad feature we picked at the end of our last episode. We're going back to a world of video game-inspired movies. We call this Video Game-Inspired Movies 2 Turbo HD Remix.
Platinum X edition.
Yes, that's true. One of many different. We'll release several different versions of this particular episode, which we're doing out of Mortal Kombat. Which, when we scheduled this, was supposed to come out in about 2 weeks. Now it's more like 3 weeks as of yesterday. A lot of people said the reason was HBO Max wanting it to be a month after the Snyder Cut, more than a month, so that someone had to pay 2 months if they want Mortal Kombat, which is kind of ingenious, and I wouldn't be surprised as like the way going forward with like some of these bigger streaming releases.
I'm still not convinced that it's also not being used to sort of button up some of the visual effects as well. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit of both. Maybe because they wanted to push it back a week, that gives them a little more time, because from what I've seen from those trailers, some of those visual effects are pretty rough. Pretty rough. Goro, I'm looking at you.
Sort of wonky special effects aren't something that the Mortal Kombat movies are unfamiliar with necessarily. The live action ones.
That's true.
Come about, yes.
Yeah, that's true. Especially part 2. Or Annihilation, I apologize. Annihilation.
You call it by its God-given Christian name, sir.
Right, how dare I?
But yeah, so we're talking about, with video game-inspired movies, we emphasize, as we did the last time we did this about 2 years ago, that with video game-inspired movies, it is movies not just adapted directly from video games, but also ones that have been inspired by sort of the concept of video games. Obviously, with the video game movies, it's tough because not a lot of good ones, maybe almost zero good ones, right, that are adapted directly from video games.
Yeah, to be honest, even sitting here, and this is the topic of the night, and I don't think I can name one that's really sort of spectacular. There's some that are kind of meandering, some that are passable, but I can't think of one that's like really good.
The one that I keep hearing about is genuinely good that's directly adapted, I just haven't seen, is the Takashi Miike directed Phoenix Wright movie. I've heard is great.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that one either, but yeah, I wouldn't mind maybe checking that out. That sure. Sounds...
Takashi Miike and also... Objection!
Objection!
But at the same time, like with the video game inspired thing, there have been plenty of movies that have adapted stuff from video games and done fun things with them, as back as something like Tron, even, which is predates this a bit, our 2 movies today.
Or your good choice on the last time, Scott Pilgrim.
Right.
Perfectly fits the bill.
Yep. Or even we did that episode around the time of Detective Pikachu, which I'd argue is one of the better ones.
Oh, that's true. You know, I didn't even think of that one. That one's super cute. But again, that's based on, that doesn't come straight from a video game.
No, well, Detective Pikachu is a straight-up video game in Japan.
Oh, well then, I guess fuck me, huh?
Though I'm not sure how closely adapted it is necessarily, but just the idea of Pikachu as a detective with the hat is a thing. That's about it. The extent of it.
Well, that's about all I knew. Well, that sounds great. I think. I don't know. I'm not into the...
I wouldn't mind playing that. That sounds like fun.
I guess. I'm not really a Pokemon. Get it? Get it?
That's true, because
Get it.
that's a very important thing, especially with video games, is that we kind of grew up at different eras where, like, you know, to be fair, with most things, like, we have a lot of, like, commonalities in our interests in movies in particular, but video games, like, given, especially the fact that video games aren't preserved that well, a difference of, like, you know, 9 years, like, between us is, like, a gulf for video game systems.
Yeah, right. Yeah, basically. You got to figure my big system, like, was like the groundbreaking system was the PS1. The one that changed everything. That's the one, if not even that, before it was Dreamcast, like when they were first on discs. And of course there was Sega CD and shit like that, but you know, yours is probably PS2, basically?
I would say probably the first, like, Xbox was around the time of the PS2, right?
Yes. Yeah,
I would
around the same time.
Yeah, I would say, like, the game system I at least remember playing the most were more like the 360, and then even like the PlayStation 3. That was when I was like at peak video game consumption, I would say, even though I had the 360. I would like switch around systems, because my first ever system was a hand-me-down Sega Genesis, and then I went to Nintendo 64, which I played the shit out of, like, the 12 or so games I had. I played the shit out of. And then PlayStation 2 and 360, and then the PlayStation 4, which I currently have.
Right, that's all I got too. It's the PlayStation 4, and that's enough for me. I it's not that I don't necessarily upgrade to the next gen systems. It's just I barely play my PlayStation 4 as it is, so I can't really justify the expense.
I wait until, like, my systems die to do that.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm going to do too. Actually, no, that's 100% what I did. My PlayStation 3 shit the bed, so I bought a PlayStation 4.
Right, and plus, like, I wasn't going to buy a 5, like, on launch. It's like, oh, that looks cool, but I'm not going to spend that much money now. I'm going to wait till it's around, like, $350 or so in, like, a couple of years.
Yeah, right. Agreed.
With the video game-inspired movies element of it, we haven't even talked about much about some of the interesting ones that do fun things with, like, the actual gameplay into integrating into cinema, because I think that's the bigger innovation as of recent in particular, is back in the day, like when video games were more of a thing, and like when they were starting to become the bigger thing in the 90s, critics constantly, like Roger Ebert famously, was very like, video games aren't art, they should invade my cinema, and movies that feel stodgy and familiar, action movies, tend to feel like video games, to quote him. But I think it hasn't been a problem seeing like that kind of thing integrate more into movies, especially movies kind of upgrade to the level of being able to do like the big elaborate action scenes you see in video games. I don't think that's a problem necessarily cinematically.
No, I don't either. This Roger Ebert was such an elitist.
Look out.
Shut up, Roger.
I loved Ebert, but also he had plenty of things just like, oh, you're very old man, kids get off my lawn, kind of things like that.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Even especially with horror movies, that was his big thing. But now, Adam, we gotta talk about our two movies that we picked for this episode at the end of last week, because you had the two good movies, I had the two bad, and we ended up picking my pick. That's a bad pick we'll discuss first, of Double Dragon, the direct adaptation of a video game, and then we'll be talking about your pick, Brainscan, which you chose, but also shout out to our patrons, patreon.com/DETVpod. Ultimately ended up picking between that and Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. And it's a very interesting double feature, also both releases from 1994.
Yeah, which, you know, obviously you enlightened me to right before we started recording. I had no idea.
Yes, and I had no idea until I was doing the notes for this episode either. I had thought one of these was at least like 97. I thought Double Dragon was more that way. But when you watch it, like, oh no, this is 94. This is 100% 1994. Which, let's get into that here. Let's get into Double Dragon.
2007. Los Angeles. The city has changed. Cops rule the day. Punks rule the night. And one man wants to rule them all. There's only one thing he needs to succeed. And look who's got it.
It magnifies the power inside you.
All right, so where's the on button?
If they succeed, they're heroes. But if he does, they're history.
Watch your step.
T2's Robert Patrick, Scott Wolf, Mark Dacascos, and Alyssa Milano. Double Dragon.
You said it.
So Double Dragon came out November 4th, 1994. And has some interesting people involved in it. James Ukrich is the director. He didn't direct any movies before or after this, but he was a big music video director. Most notably, he did a lot of videos for Genesis, including the Land of Confusion, which is one of my favorite music videos.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's a great video for sure. That's probably their best video.
Probably, yeah. And also the people who have some writing credits. The two big ones for me are like Paul Dini, who is a big person who you would know from like Batman the Animated Series, like wrote a lot of those Bruce Timm Superman stuff in particular. And then the other guy is Peter Gould. He was a big writer on Breaking Bad and would go on to co-create Better Call Saul. He's like the other big writer on that show as well, which you can totally tell from this movie, all the intense drama that happens.
So much. I mean, this movie is just a roller coaster ride of emotion.
Yes, and is based on the Double Dragon video game, which I vaguely recall playing at certain points, because I remember the arcade game standee that you see in the movie, where the movie completely breaks its own reality and prominently displays the Double Dragon thing. I remember playing that a bit. It's very much a traditional side-scroller kind of thing from that time. It was innovative for the time. You're just a couple guys that are fighting alongside the street that, like, you go all the way to the right, and then it loads back up behind you, and you keep going to the right, and you beat up guys along the way, and then there's like a boss at the end of the road. There's like 5 levels of that.
Yeah, pretty much. I played the shit out of it on Nintendo ad nauseum. The arcade version is notoriously one of the most difficult sort of arcade games ever made. It's so ridiculously hard. But yeah, I definitely played it on Nintendo all the time. I loved Double Dragon. You know, you got to figure though, in 94, I was 11 years old. So this movie was like right up, like, oh, Double Dragon, and it's live action, and the T-1000's in it, and it's martial arts. Oh yeah. Fuck.
Well, and we should also, like, a big thing you didn't even mention is this is only the second major film based on a video game after the Super Mario Brothers movie was the previous year. It was obviously an infamous disaster at the time, so this was a novelty still.
And you'd think that they would have learned maybe from the Mario Brothers to maybe, you know, not just take the simplicity of the game and make it into something so dumb and outrageous. Nope, they didn't learn from that. This movie could have been just bad guy takes one of their girlfriends and the brothers got to go fight through the city to get her back. Could have easily been that and been fine.
I don't know, given the rate of film production, I wouldn't be surprised if it was more a case of like, oh, it'll be like Mario, yeah, it'll work. We're seeing what they're doing. Let's just greenlight. I'm sure they were like midway through like pre-production or even starting shooting, and then they saw that like, Thanksgiving weekend dump. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
That's probably more accurate. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Because this is technically based on Double Dragon. It takes place in the distant future of 1997 in New Angeles. Which is a version of Los Angeles where it's no longer lost, but it's new. But the newness about it is a post-apocalyptic wasteland in which gangs rule the night, and cops are still considered heroes. And this movie has a really weird conservative bent to it that I was not aware was a thing. Everyone is under the rule of one particular villain, Koga, as played by Robert Patrick.
Koga Shuko, played by Robert Patrick.
Yep, the most appropriate person for that. He is trying to get this magical amulet that it comes in 2 parts, and we see a village get slaughtered early on so that he can end up getting at least one half of it. But he's like, I need the second half, and the second half is with these 2 clearly brothers, Billy and Jimmy Lee, played by Scott Wolf and Mark Dacascos. They look so similar.
So similar in every single way. And even like their fighting, it's so just... These guys clearly trained and grew up together.
Right, because Mark Dacascos in real life was training to be a martial artist since he was age 7 and won several tournaments. And Scott Wolf was on Party of 5.
That's right. That's what he did.
It's so simple. It's just like, it's 2 brothers. They're the Double Dragons. Yeah. That's the point.
That's enough. Like I said, oh God, dude. A Bobo.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about, spoilers, this is a terrible movie, we both really don't like it, but
awful.
It's because it's what you're talking about, like a lot of these video game movies tend to do this thing, where it's like, oh, hey, we're going to get the property and have the very basic thing of like, hey, let's cast 2 people to kind of vaguely resemble the main characters on the game box. But, like, that's it. And then they interject a bunch of stuff like, I don't remember Double Dragon that well, but I don't remember the weird, flimsy parody of the Warriors that has, like, all these different people that are after these 2.
Well, there was a Bobo. He was just a big, bald, muscled guy. Wasn't like... Yeah, there were kind of these gangs, but they weren't like this at all. I mean, there was a Bobo, there was Lash, there was characters like that, but not to this level, not to where there's postmen. There's a postman gang and this type of stuff.
Airmail.
Hey, postal workers are shooting up their offices. Let's make a funny gang about them.
Right, but let's not have also the audacity to go full way with that. So it's like, oh, he's like a suicide jumper, but he gets up anyway after that?
Yep, he completely gets up. This is literally name only that it's Double Dragon. That's literally it. And like I said, a couple of character names. Like a Bobo and Lash, those are real characters. And Alyssa Milano's character, her name, I think, might be the name. I forget the character's name. That's how fucking shitty this is. But I think her character might be the name of one of their girlfriends who gets abducted or whatever.
Marian Delario.
Yeah, I think Marianne might be the name. I don't even remember. But, oof. And let's just sexualize Alyssa Milano the whole movie.
Yeah, they do that quite a lot.
Oh, nonstop. It's kind of disgusting. They show her from behind and bent over, I swear to God, 5 times in this movie. And the brothers do the same thing. We're like, I'm going next. No, I'm going next. Don't you even think about it. Like, And, I just feel so bad for Mark Dacascos. I really do.
Yes.
Because you bust your balls to become a martial artist. You get a fucking big movie about martial arts,
and he has a lot of personality as like a performer. He would be like, he's been fun in other things too, and even in this I can see him really trying.
He's better than everybody in the movie.
Yes, 100%.
I mean, and that's not saying much. He's not great, but at least he's fully committed more than anybody else in the movie is.
He has a more committed personality in particular. That's the biggest problem with putting him with Scott Wolf, who even if he couldn't fight, like, okay, if you had some chemistry with this dude as your brother who you look nothing like if we were able to at least go past that and we're like, okay, you are brothers. Scott Wolf is like a vacuous hole of personality.
There's nothing to him.
Not at all, no.
There's just nothing. There's nothing enjoyable about him. There's nothing charming about him. He comes across like a whiny brat the whole movie. I will give him credit because it is clearly him doing a lot of the fighting. Like, they show it, and it's so wooden and stiff, and it's obviously him with the choreography. So I will give him credit on the fact that it is him doing it, but it's also such a stupid decision. You could have filmed this with a fucking stunt fighter so easily. You could have got any fucking random vanilla dude who knows how to fight and have been a passable stunt double.
Right, and even also, I will say the most consistent thing about the movie is I think most of the stunts are pretty competent or even good at points. Particularly, there's a fight that Mark Dacascos has with the Al Leong henchman character, who, if you don't know Al Leong, if you've seen any 80s movie where there's a henchman, one of them is Al Leong.
Well, and the other one's the other one.
True.
It's both of those guys. Both of those guys have main parts in Big Trouble in Little China as henchmen. You see them both predominantly in that. I mean, they're both in everything. And their names are Huey and Lewis. Oh,
right,
no.
But particularly the fight that happens between Al Leong and Mark Dacascos with the sticks, I think is the highlight of the fight choreography in the movie. I think it's generally the most investing fight that happens. I'm like, oh my god, this is so great. But it has to be contrasted with Scott Wolf fighting the other guy. I'm just like,
Yeah, Scott Wolf just throwing fucking shitty roundhouse punches. Like, get away from me.
Well, there's that, and also just a lot of like the silly antics, like, oh, here's the gumball machine, and the guy falls over into the fucking baby carriage.
Oh, yeah. Look, all I know is I'm so excited for the future of 1997.
Yeah.
I know that anytime I turn on the news, it's going to be George Hamilton, Vanna White, and Andy Dick at the Weatherman.
Yeah.
And it's them playing themselves.
Also, when Andy Dick says, you two are crazy, you should seek some kind of medical help, because that man is insane.
Oh, he's nuts.
Yes. And oh, by the way, before we go too far off of this, credit Jeff Imada is the other guy that you're referring to.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, dude, he's in everything as well.
They're both very committed stunt performers who are trying as much as they can all the way until they are very poorly dubbed at the end of the movie.
I don't understand why they're dubbed. I don't get it. Well, yes, I do. Can't have them sound like that. Not in America.
Well, no, and also it feels like it's part of this recurring thing where this movie is like talking down to kids in terms of it feels so much like a, hey, you kids like this kind of movie, with particularly, it has so much of the aesthetic of like early 90s Nick.
Yes.
Like literally, when they're in their compound at the end, the moat that's there is just full of slime.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tell me how fun the car chase scene was. That went on for fucking ever.
Yeah, the opening car chase scene takes a while. Honestly, the only sort of chase I found to kind of work was the boat chase.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, especially because there's massive explosions.
There's massive explosions, and it's actually there. Whereas the car chase scene, half of it takes place on a poorly rendered, like, video game.
We've said this before about certain action movies, but this would work so much better instead of an hour-and-a-half long movie as, like, a 20-minute stunt spectacular at Universal. Because all the good bits feel like stunt spectacular bits.
I don't think I've ever agreed with you more on that than for this movie.
Because everyone's playing it about as big as one of those fucking stunt spectacular things, where like clearly the audio was like coming over a loudspeaker, and like, guys, let's go this way. Like it feels like that.
Yeah. Like I said, especially a Bobo. That actor, who's a stuntman, typically. Like you might have seen him in things like The Mask, or he played Jesse Ventura in the made-for-TV Jesse Ventura movie. Or he's been in a bunch of stuff.
Henry Kingi is his name.
Yeah, he's been in a ton of stuff, dude. He's never a good actor. He's just not a good actor. But he's so fucking annoying in this movie. He's so dumb. And I don't know if it's kind of clear it's ADR work whenever he talks.
100%.
Because it's so loud and aggressive for no reason. And just the Abobo suit and costume is so stupid. And his thing where he's totally like, I'll get him, I'm Fujuka. So you're telling me since he transformed, he's never seen himself in the mirror? And then when he does, he's like, Brr, and cries. And then all of a sudden he's a good guy. He's got spinach farts, though.
Well, and he also, this is the, I'm gonna barf. He has like so many of the annoying lines that feel once again just like, you kids like this, right? You like the Nick. That's what this character, he's like sort of that Nick Orange logo from the early 90s embodied.
Yep. For
all the annoying factors of it.
He's like the fucking annoying frog. That awful fucking...
At least he's not auto-tuned.
That's true. I mean, he basically is, though.
Well, imagine if he was auto-tuned and singing all of his lines. That would make it an extra layer of terrible.
Oh, God. It's like Post Malone. I'm still not mad at the way they did the Robert Patrick effects, especially for 94.
Mm-hmm.
When he turns into a shadow and moves around and stuff, like half of it's animated, half of it's CG. It still looks kind of cool. I wasn't even mad at the character design when he split into the two with swords. I'm like, oh, okay, this fits for this movie and this universe and stuff. But they do nothing with it. And then when Mark DeCasco body jumps into him, oh, I literally like let out an audible groan every time because I'm like, oh no, Robert Patrick. No.
Yeah, we should mention this is Robert Patrick very hot off of Terminator 2.
I think this was his first, like his next big thing.
I think this is the first thing he shot post T2. Mm-hmm. And it feels like it because he has like the confidence of that, but also I think that confidence really works against him in this particular case where he's going hammy, but in a way that feels like there's not a lot of effort into it. He's just like, oh, I don't care what, it's a kid's movie, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, pretty much. The reason behind it is, he likes martial arts movies. Did he read the fucking script? Because then he would have known he's not making a martial arts movie. This is in no way a martial arts movie, by the way.
No,
in no way.
It's much more of like a dystopian fantasy movie.
Yeah, and these fucking costumes they put him in at the end. These red and blue sort of karate gis with gold fucking like gemstones all over them. It's the dumbest looking shit.
It's the rhinestone cowboy cosplay of the double dragon outfits, pretty much. Yeah. There's also the weird thing, I kind of mentioned this earlier, the weird, really conservative bent this movie has about, like, the one-dimensional thugs and also the cop characters with, like, Melissa Milano's dad. Just like, I'm a good cop. I'm not gonna be susceptible to your dirty bribes. I'm not doing that, but also, fuck you, and our curfew against all of you is legit. Watching it in 2021 is very interesting, with particularly that bit about the curfew.
I agree, and I really love the I'm not taking your money no matter what, your dirty money at the end. Yeah, I'll take it. That's cool. You know what I mean? He give him a check for $25 million. He's like, all right, sweet. Like, this is fuck yeah, man. All right, well, good looking out, bro. It's it's so dumb. And then the whole rousing speech that he tries to have with his other officers, where he's like, "We're going after. That's an order," and none of them do. So he's like, "All right, I'll do it myself." And of course, they all show up anyways. And you're like, "This is so fucking stupid." And everybody's so stoked to see the cops at the end. The police are here. Where you nah.
And they totally support, like, those fucking cops anyway. The movie doesn't really punish them at all. They're just like, oh, they're the good guys.
No, at all.
We didn't mention that Billy and Jimmy have a female guardian of some sort.
Yes, Satori, which they never really explain. All they explain is that their parents died and she took care of them. That's all you know.
Julia Nixa, who is sort of just introduced like, hey, let me give you some exposition, and then I'm gonna die. And it's the one sort of female character who isn't totally objectified like Alyssa Milano is.
Yeah, but yet she is in a way, because it's clearly implied that her and Robert Patrick used to bang.
Right, there's that element of it, that it's less objectification and more of just like, oh, of course you have this connection with the villain character.
Yep, and this is how we're going to tie it in. Not to where, he could have been, friends with their parents or something like that. Nah, he was banging her now. It's so dumb, and it's so lazy, and it's so sloppy in almost every way, especially as far as from a script to realization standpoint. Look, we've talked about definitions of cash grabs on this show, and clearly they were just wanted the money. This is a prime example of that. They're hoping that enough people give that much of a shit about Double Dragon that this is going to be a huge runaway success.
And they didn't, because it made, for its $7.8 million budget, made $4.2 million at the box office. So this was the beginning of the pretty bad trend of these video game movies being very overbloated and not that successful.
The licensed soundtrack is so aggressive and annoying, especially in the opening car chase scene, where it's the same fucking lyrics, whatever the guy is saying, and he's saying it over and over and over ad nauseum, rapidly fast, over like a hardcore fucking like techno rock beat. And it's so bad. And then you just have a Bobo and the guy who's with him laughing aggressively loud for 5 minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot of just like it's filling the void with noise. I guess I'm going to ask, before we get into final thoughts, Adam, given your vitriol for it, would you say it's the worst video game movie ever made?
No, I would put any Uwe Boll movie up against this one and call it worse.
Yes.
I really would. This is at least so bad on a level that I want to talk about it. Uwe Boll movies, I really don't. I have nothing to say about them.
Or even like the last time we did one of these episodes, we covered Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li as our alternate choice, which is a movie that's completely evaporated from memory. Aside from like maybe the Chris Klein stuff lives in my head rent-free. Everything else I cannot remember at all.
Yeah, no, so I wouldn't say this is the worst. I definitely don't. I mean, and that's saying a lot, because it's really fucking bad.
I would say it's around like a bottom 10. I would definitely say it's in there.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And because there's nothing else, because like I think it's some of the stuff, the few positive things I've mentioned feel kind of wasted. Like even we didn't mention much about New Angeles. I really actually dig the matte paintings in this movie, and how they kind of like elaborate on New Angeles and how it's like been destroyed. I think that stuff looks kind of fun, but it's once again in service of this world that doesn't even feel that developed. The matte paintings are like doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah, they do look pretty legit. They're not bad. I mean, they're clearly matte paintings, but they're pretty good.
Yeah, but I would say if you want a better dystopian mid-90s movie, watch A Waterworld.
Which is saying a fucking lot.
I don't know, A Waterworld I think is kind of fun.
I'm not mad at Waterworld either.
No, that would be a guilty pleasure we should talk about on the show at some point, because there's a lot of fun things about Waterworld. Another movie that was adapted admittedly better into a stunt spectacular show that's still running to this day in Hollywood.
That is still running?
I know. That's the weird thing. More people know it, I think, as the stunt show. It's a pretty fun stunt show, if you've ever seen it. It's dope.
I don't think I did. Last time I was out there, it was the Indiana Jones stunt show.
Well, that
So
would
that was a
be
while.
over at Disney Hollywood Studios there, not at Universal.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the only one I think I've ever seen. So
To circle back to Double Dragon, how about final thoughts? Final thoughts on Double Dragon.
I mean, what more can we really say? It's garbage. It's populated by just really stupid decisions, bad acting, horrible action choreography, no martial arts, basically, and just everybody's on just such a weird level. And I'd argue nobody's on the same level out of any of the performances. It's disjointed shit that plays to the lowest denominator of, hey, we got this name. You'll see it because you recognize the name. We don't care about the content. We just care about the money. And that's exactly what this movie is. And it's garbage.
Yeah, I would agree. Those things mentioned here. I picked it mainly, honestly, because I thought it was the most adjacent thing we could do to Super Mario Brothers, which I wanted to do so badly. You have no idea how much I wanted to talk about on the show, but weirdly, it's not streaming anywhere. Like, you can't even rent it digitally.
That's probably the best.
You have to get a physical copy, but I would argue that as bad as Super Mario Brothers is, I find it more fascinating for all the things we're talking about, like weird dystopian future, very bizarre garish set design, pretty poor casting. All that stuff is more interesting, at least to watch, in Super Mario Brothers than it is in this, which is much more disposable, much more objectifying that we mentioned. We even talked much about some of the racism in the movie as well, just like the flagrant, just like, oh, we're just using like all this different like Asian mysticism stuff to really entice all of you into like, oh, it's like Double Dragon. It doesn't work really that well. There's a few interesting fight bits. I like some of the matte paintings. Mark Dacascos, God help him. That poor young man is trying to make any of this work. But the movie, even like the moment I officially knew like, oh, there's nothing for this movie, is during the third act. There's a solid portion where Mark Dacascos is off screen and we're focusing on Scott Wolf. That is really where you know this movie's completely gone down the toilet. Just like, you're why do you not have the other guy on screen who's more charismatic and more importantly knows martial arts way better than this fucker? Why are we looking at his dumb face? I'd rather be looking at Jeremy London's face.
Ooh. I mean, they're kind of the same guy, but yeah, I get it.
They're kind of this. That's true. It's different blocks of wood. Just like, I like this shade of this oak better than this one in particular. True. And nothing else, if you want a better Double Dragon movie, even though this movie predates Double Dragon and definitely inspired Final Fight, which was sort of a Double Dragon adjacent type fighting game, watch Streets of Fire.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Streets of Fire is like an interesting, like it pretty much inspired all side-scrolling like beat-em-up games. If you watch it, it has a lot of those vibes, and it's very great. I love that movie. But we got a whole other movie to talk about that has its own interesting qualities. But first, here's a promo for an ESO show you can queue up right after ours.
What is the Soul Forge podcast? Join Sean and his guests as they talk about sex, geekiness, witchcraft, Star Trek, awkward dates, poetry, life, the universe, and everything else. Interviews have included writers, atheists, a rap star from Australia, a reality TV star, and a sex goddess from San Diego. If you have a story to share or just want to listen to one, check out the Soul Forge podcast. The Soul Forge. Let's find out together.
All right, and let's get into Brainscan.
Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Trickster.
Michael's seen it.
Go for it, man.
Done it. Played it.
Look, I've played them all.
And just when he thought he'd die of boredom.
Brainscan, the ultimate experience in interactive terror.
Never leave home without it.
You must think like a killer. Cover up any clues. Leave no witnesses, no evidence.
A challenge he can't resist.
It was so real.
A game he can't escape.
There was a grisly murder in the quiet suburban town of Mountview today.
So you did it.
What was on that disc?
It's not a game anymore.
Hamilton and Hayden.
It's real.
It wasn't supposed to be real!
Real, unreal. What's the difference?
Edward Furlong, Frank Langella, and introducing T. Ryder Smith as the trickster. Brainscan.
I can't wait to see what you do next.
So, Brainscan also came out in 1994, a bit earlier, April 22nd, 1994, from director John Flynn. Also notable, the first screenwriting credit for Andrew Kevin Walker, who the next year would make his big splash with Seven.
Jesus, Seven was only a year after this.
I know. Similar vibes, clearly, with all the various murders that happened in this movie. And you know what, Adam? This was your pick, and I want you to tell people a bit more about Brainscan, because this one's definitely the more obscure choice, to the point where I wasn't even aware this was a movie when you picked it as one of the options for the Patreon poll. So why don't you tell people a bit about Brainscan, lead that into your initial thoughts on it.
Brainscan basically follows this kid. He's a loner kid. He's the president of the horror club at school where they watch horror movies. He's really into, Fangoria and all these graphic horror movies. He's got one best friend. He lives with his dad because his mom passed away and his dad's never home. So he's got this sweet ass house with all this impossible technology, especially for 1994, to himself. And his buddy calls him one night and tells him there's this brand new interactive horror video game that's supposed to be, the best, scariest thing you could ever possibly get. So he gets it, and basically it causes him to commit murders. And each disc he plays, he has to go back and cover up evidence or kill somebody else. And the whole time there's this character, a very Freddy Krueger type character called the Trickster, who's sort of guiding him through all these things. And there's also a bit of stalker shit with the girl next door, and Frank Langella's in it for some reason. And that's basically the gist of it. It's just a, early 90s to close to mid 90s sort of one-off horror movie. You can tell they're trying to capitalize sort of on the video game craze at the time, as well as new special effects that exist out there. That being said, when I first saw it, I hate Edward Furlong. I hated him then. I still don't like him. I think he's one of the, I don't want to say worst child actors, because he was a kid when he did Terminator. But he's just, I just can't stand him. I can't stand his whiny voice. I can't, just something about him. I've never really liked him, and I didn't like him in this either. But I was really sort of into the movie because it gets really dark. It goes in kind of crazy directions that aren't expected. The Trickster's super fun. It does have a twist. There is a twist to it too, that when I first saw this, I did not expect. So, I mean, that's why I picked it. It's definitely a nostalgia pick for me. It's one of those movies that anytime it's on, I'll watch it.
Well, one, it took me until you literally said Edward Furlong's name to realize we had two T2 vehicles for this episode.
Oh my god. Holy shit, from the same year too.
From the same year, very interesting. And yeah, I hadn't seen it before, and I find it fascinating as a time capsule, and I think there are points where I was really engaged with what it was doing. I do agree, I think Edward Furlong's a huge problem. I liked him in T2, but he's not necessarily my favorite actor. I haven't seen a lot of the stuff he's even been in, because I haven't even seen American History X, which I know is his other good movie, from what I've heard, honestly. And with this, I think he just sucks so much of the potential either pathos or intriguing creepiness of the character. He's just he's so kind of limp. And every time he has any interactions with some of his people, including what took me out of the movie immediately, Jamie Marsh plays his best buddy teenager friend, and that dude was literally 27, and he looks it.
See, I don't agree. I don't agree. I don't think he looks 27. To be honest, I was kind of surprised when I read the notes. I'm like, that dude was 27? I did not see it that way.
That dude has so many miles, especially in any scene where he's interacting with Edward Furlong. I joked earlier about oh, hey, he's got bags under his eyes with Edward Furlong. He's a very tired teenager. Jamie Marsh looks so much just hey, why don't you stay away from this 15-year-old kid? You're clearly 12 years his senior. I did not believe for a fucking single second that dude was not over drinking age at least.
That's fair.
But yeah, I don't believe any of the chemistry he has with other people around him. And I think a lot of these other characters are even kind of flat. Like, not even just Jamie Marsh, but also his love interest. I was so, like, weirded out by this whole thing where, okay, are we supposed to be kind of on this weird fence about, like, is he a killer? What's he doing here with, like, the girl next door, as played by Amy Hargreaves? When we get to later on and you find out, oh, no, it was fine because she was also stalking him from across the fucking way. And it's a weird thing where I kept going hot and cold on it because I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of fascinating. Oh, it's creepy. Oh, wait, she also is spying. That's really weird. But also, oh, this turns out being his fantasy kind of thing. Oh my god, that could work. And then by the end of the movie, there's like a hopeful note of like, oh no, we're stalking each other. We might get together.
Yeah, they love each other. They're friends.
Weird twists and turns there. Honestly, the only sort of engaging element I found as a character was, I agree with you, the Trickster, despite being a very clear Freddy ripoff, is so much fun. Shout out to T. Ryder Smith, who's mostly a stage actor, I found out, because he hasn't done that many movies. The only thing I kind of weirdly know him from is he's a voice on Venture Brothers a lot. He's like the voice of the Baron Underbite, the dude with the metal jaw. And also there's like a weird Justice League style parody thing, and there's a Fishman. And he's also that voice. He's a very theatrical, fun actor, which I think works because I watched a clip of him talking about playing the Trickster, where he has like contact lenses and also so much heavy face makeup that it felt like he was sort of doing like a Greek mask kind of performance. And I think that works so well for him, where he's going over the top in a way that doesn't, like when you watch, it's just like, oh, he's just raising his eyebrow a bit in a way that's kind of cocking it, kind of fun. When in reality, under that mask, he is like putting his eyes as far up as he possibly can under the makeup. I think that balances out to a really fun, admittedly Freddy ripoff, but still a really entertaining one. Whenever he just like, whatever he does with his hands in particular, his long ass fingernails and stuff, he like relishes it in a really fun way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's actually pretty exciting to watch. Yeah, no, he's clearly the MVP of the movie. I gotta be honest though, even though he clearly doesn't give a shit, but of all the human actors in the movie, Frank Langella is still the best.
Well, Frank Langella honestly ended up working better for me with the twist. There are certain things where like the twist you talk about either increases some things for me in my respect for them or totally decreases it. Like, that works so well for him because the whole movie you're wondering, why is he so like kind of plain? Why is he just kind of like barely emoting? And it's like, oh, he's an NPC. Not in the weird, creepy red pill way on the internet, but the literally a non-player character who keeps like showing up. It's just like, hey, what are you doing here? Like, if he was just moving and it's still in place, like, he would almost work even better for him.
Like walking into a wall when he's trying to leave and stuff.
Yes.
Get caught up on the wall.
Because he has a lot of those features to him, and I think that works in an intimidating way, even especially as he starts investigating what's going on, like, near the end as well. I thought that, like, really made him a bit creepier as things kept going. And honestly, like, all the stuff I like about this movie is more just on a interesting, like, sort of mechanical level with, like, what the story's doing. Like, even the virtual reality thing, pretty inventive for the time. And also really works, especially a lot of the POV camera stuff of you experiencing the game with Edward Furlong, I think really works as pretty immersive.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's kind of disturbing.
Yeah.
Like, the POV stuff they show is pretty fucked up. Like, the way he kills the first guy and, you know, hacks his foot off and all that shit. You're like, this is fucked up.
I wish they used a better foot prop, though, because that looked straight out like a Halloween spirit store.
And why would that guy have that one tattoo on the top of his foot? Just so you could be like, oh, that's definitely the same foot. Like, it could have just been Eddie Foot. You would have got it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But just him, like, Edward Furlong going into that dude's house and grabbing the knife. It feels like it's kind of the evolution of the Halloween 2 shot, I believe, of him picking up the knife, Michael Myers. And, like, coming into the house, stuff like that.
No, I definitely agree. And of course, he's, you know, got black gloves on, so it's very giallo and things like that. Like, they clearly were throwing their influences right out there.
But also adapting them into a new art form where, like we said, video games were relatively new at this time. And I think developing that into, oh, what if you were experiencing this killer POV? Done plenty of times in other video games at this point. But for 1994, groundbreaking.
I still stand by that this movie could be more sort of well remembered and even loved if it wasn't for Edward fucking Furlong.
The director even agrees with you. John Flynn literally said, Eddie Furlong was a 15-year-old kid who couldn't act. I don't want to get into knocking people, but I was not a big fan of his.
Yeah, it's just he sort of tanks his own movie right on screen. I don't know, man. There's some of his line delivery still just annoys me and even makes me laugh to this day. Like, his name's Michael Brower, right? Michael Browser?
Brower.
Some shit like
yeah, it's Brower.
Yeah. I'm Michael Brower. I'm 16 and I'm scared for my life. Oh, stop it. Like, I don't know if I'm the killer, but if this is it, then this is my confession. Like, okay. All right. Like, it's just, yeah, he's so just, he's a wet blanket. Like, there's nothing to him, and he's just annoying.
It makes you respect younger DiCaprio performances a lot more when you watch him.
100%.
Yeah, because like when you watch like him, he feels like what they're trying to put him in the slot they tried to put him in around this point in the 90s was, oh, let's make him like a DiCaprio pretty boy, but the bad boy version of it. Which, and he's even got like the plaids, the loner, the rebel, the guy who likes Fangoria.
And he has, horror movie posters all over his room, which I don't know any horror fan who's a fan of every single one of those movies he has up on his wall. Like, he's got a very eclectic horror taste,
to say the least.
Good for him, I guess.
What I really like is sort of the escalation that happens with this movie for like the game discs. How it becomes more and more almost like an addiction. In a way, admittingly, that also both these movies have a weird conservative bent to them that kind of feels like it's at this age once again. That unfortunately hasn't technically passed. It's just like, oh, let's blame violent video games for like and movies for like horror movies for kids stuff. This is a very pro like the parent advisory sticker and just like really blaming all that kind of shit for these characters. But at the same time, I like the temptation that builds with the trickster character in particular, as he's really trying to like, oh, we gotta play this next disc. I really like how that builds in particular. Like all the structural stuff I think really works about the movie.
That's why I said if it was any other actor, it's torture. Like, he's basically torturing this kid. Like, whether or not you want to do it, you have to. And, I'm right here with you, and he's gaslighting him the whole time and stuff. And it's terrifying.
Especially the bit where he slits his hand and then that blood becomes the disc.
Becomes the disc, right.
That's a really dope moment,
yeah. Or Michael breaks the disc, and then, he's like, I already destroyed it. Let me get some milk. And Trickster's like, no, you didn't. He's got it spinning on his finger. Like, it's fucking dope. Like, no matter what you can do, you're not going to get away from this. There's such a great skeleton to this movie, and I'd say a little bit of meat on the bones.
Tonally, I'm not sure what kind of horror movie this is trying to be. It's too silly to be an outright slasher horror movie, but it's also too, like, gory and fucked up to be, like, a horror comedy. It doesn't know really what it wants to be.
I agree, and I think one of the biggest sort of problems with that, where you come away sort of tonally shocked to, like, what is this, is the final scene. Yes. Where he gives the game to the principal, and all of a sudden there's Trickster for real, and he can see him. Like, wait a minute. This means nothing. Like, it doesn't make literally a lick of sense.
Whether it does, like, the logic of the story, or also even just the weird morality of the movie, where technically, even though, like, we're punishing the principal, he is spouting, like, the rhetoric that basically the movie agrees with. Of just like, oh, you fuck violent video games, fuck violent movies. Edward Furlong destroys his room after he wakes up, just like, oh my god, it was all simulation. I gotta stay the fuck away from all this shit so I don't end up murdering people and all this other bullshit. It feels like it's so scattershot with what it's going for on like a logic level or a sort of thematic level, to the point where this is a key example of a movie that I think, I agree with you, the skeletal structure works so well. Remake this movie.
Yes, dude, 1,000%. Especially with modern day technology and everything too, it would work perfectly.
And even like the upgrade of video games would be interesting, where at this point now you have like so many like online games, or even like especially like the PlayStation Store where you can just download as much games as possible. You can, I think, make this into like it's almost like instead of just one video game, it's an entire like video game system and network that can easily like interact with your home. That would work perfectly. Don't do like Stay Alive. Like, that's the bad version of that.
Oh god. Ooh. Ooh. Or fucking Is There a Hell World?
I think you could get like a Blumhouse style interesting twist on this movie now. That would work really well.
I completely agree. This is definitely one that I think is ripe for a remake. Unfortunately, with most remakes, it's going to go either way. It's either going to be really awesome or kind of shitty. But I think there's enough potential already with sort of what we have to where if they just expanded upon it and sort of course corrected some of it, that it could be something really cool, really fun. I don't think it would be necessarily like, that was such an awesome movie, but I think you could have a really fun movie here.
And you could even have somebody play a trickster type character, I think could become like
sure.
a newer horror icon. I want Doug Jones Trickster.
Now I do too, and I never thought I did. But yes, I agree.
And imagine what he could do express inside that makeup. T. Ryder Smith was just too restricted by the constraints of the time. Now, imagine.
Right, good Lord. Like I said, I am in full, and I guess we could just make this my final thoughts, but I'm in full recognition that this is not a good movie. I think it's a perfectly fine movie. I think it's incredibly flawed, but I still think it's entertaining. I still think there's enough here to sort of be entertained by it, and also the factor of like, what could this have been, or what could this be if they redid it? For that alone, I still got a soft spot for this movie, much like I had with like even Man's Best Friend. I think this is a better movie than Man's Best Friend, but this is definitely on that level with me, where it's just these 90s horror movies that I saw God only knows where, and they've sort of stuck with me, and this is definitely right up there with those.
Yeah, and I would say I didn't hate this movie necessarily. I found it fascinating. It's definitely the better movie of our double feature for sure. But at the same time, I keep seeing the restrictions that are kind of around it because of the time, because of the main actor, because of a lot of things, to where it's definitely it's an entertaining watch. I would say watch it for T. Ryder Smith. I don't think his performance, I think, is so like electric and fun. Even when he actually interacts with a video game environment, we didn't talk that much, but the bit where he's on the TV screen, he's like scratching it, and it looks like very pixelated, like 90s era, like Sega CD effects, I think is like works tremendously. It has such interesting skeletal structure that I agree. I think it's a movie like any movie you should remake, full of plenty of good ideas, just not the best execution possible. That would make it right for a modern version that you can especially get a lot of modern video game sort of terminology and interesting thematic stuff to add to it. But as it's saying, still is entertaining for what it is, as like it's a very uneven movie in a way where I'm watching it constantly, and it's like I said, especially all the revelations about the twist really just make me go back and forth about certain ones I think really work and stuff I think doesn't. The thing is, I can see why Andrew Kevin Walker kind of became the screenwriter he ended up being, which is like, these kind of gimmicky thrillers that end up ultimately being, done by someone better. Like, I don't know, David Fincher's Brainscan would be a lot different, clearly. But I can see a bit of like his early writing chops in here even. But yeah, it definitely feels like it's a movie that it's a time capsule with interesting reason, and it's also, despite being a gory horror movie, a conservative politician's wet dream.
Yeah,
it's like, this is what these things do to you kids. Blame them, not anything we've done, and any of the stupid things we put into law.
Right.
But that's the end of our discussion of our two movies for this week, and we have some stuff to do before we do our picking for next week. Stay tuned to the very end of the show for that. But first, we have stuff like our feedback to read, because every Monday at DEDBpod, Facebook, and Twitter, we ask you all about, like, hey, what are your favorite and least favorite movies related to whatever topic that we're doing. And so you all contributed, like James Rodriguez, who says, Best, Crank and Crank 2, High Voltage, Manic Fun, Ace Attorney. Who would have thought that a Phoenix Wright film from the director of Audition would work so well? Rampage, a lot of fun. Worst Pixels, starring President Kevin James, House of the Dead, Uwe Boll Tush, and Need for Speed, Dull. Shaquille Lambert says, best, the Crank movies, Edge of Tomorrow, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Detective Pikachu, Silent Hill, and Final Fantasy VI Advent Children. Worst, Sucker Punch, Pixels, and literally every other American live-action adaptation of a video game. Christian Alvarez says, video games have had a huge influence on pop culture, including movies, whether through inspiration or adaptation. Some bad examples are Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Double Dragon, and Assassin's Creed. The worst two in recent memory being Pixels and Ready Player One, both cashing on 80s nostalgia value, with nothing more than Friedberg Seltzer quality. Oh, hey, I remember that references. Hopefully there will be more interesting efforts in the future. The best video game inspired movies would be Mortal Kombat, Silent Hill, and Detective Pikachu. Some guilty pleasure movies would include 1994's Street Fighter for Raul Julia's hamminess, Super Mario Bros. As a silly, gritty adaptation, and The Wizard as Stand By Me meets Mac and Me for Nintendo. Brendan Foley says 10 Cloverfield Lane and Edge of Tomorrow. Brian the Fuzzy, who on Twitter at Brian the Fuzzy in parentheses says to hell with 2020, Black Lives Still Matter, says Edge of Tomorrow and Scott Pilgrim are both faves. And then Ryan Quarterman, our buddy, says Hardcore Henry.
Okay, first of all, 10 Cloverfield Lane kind of surprised me. I never would have thought of that as a video game adaptation, to be honest.
I didn't either until I thought about it, but it makes sense for especially like sort of like stealth games, like all the stuff with Mary Elizabeth Winstead in the air vents has a lot of sort of like almost Tom Clancy video game quality to it.
Yeah, that's still a stretch for me on that one. I mean, thanks for the feedback.
I would also say there's a bit of a telltale game element to it. She says certain things, and it's like, John Goodman will remember this, and oh boy, will he remember, and you won't like it when he does.
Yeah, that I can see, for sure. Edge of Tomorrow, kind of, I mean, I get it.
That 100% is. That 100% is.
It still doesn't for me. I don't know. I never would have thought of that one either.
The whole objective of the movie is that he keeps learning and dying how to accomplish the level.
Understand. I would have never thought of that for some reason.
That was my first thought when I saw the trailer, was that it's very video game inspired.
And I forgot, we were talking about them earlier, but yeah, I definitely throw Silent Hill up there as one of the better ones. I still think the first Silent Hill is a pretty damn good movie. I really actually enjoy it for aesthetics and creature design and physical practical effects. Alone, I think it's pretty fucking fascinating.
I would say in terms of some of the ones that were even mentioned, like Hardcore Henry is one where I think that's another great example of sort of the aesthetic thing. I think it recreates perfectly. It's just that you realize, after a while, this gimmick gets kind of boring.
I agree. I still think it's entertaining. I still think it's fun. But after a while, I agree. You're like, okay, like, all right. I definitely agree.
Credit to Cheryl Copley, though, for being a perfect, like, sort of tutorial character.
He was so awesome in that.
He's very fun. It's one of the few times post-District 9 he's actually been cast quite well in the movie, honestly.
Completely.
And I'm excited also, that director I know is just put out Nobody, the Bob Odenkirk action movie.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that was him. Oh, sweet.
Yeah, which I'm very curious to see.
Makes me even a little more excited for it. Yeah, Crank 1 and 2, of course. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Particularly Crank 2 goes full bore with that.
Oh, yeah. Crank 2 is Crank 2 is insane.
Yes.
It is insane.
Which is saying something, even the first Crank is also insane, but Crank 2 puts up literally the high voltage as an appropriate subtitle.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love those movies. They're so fun.
And I would say in terms of even some of like the video game inspired ones, like I'm surprised no one mentioned Overlord, which I think is an underrated example of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's very Wolfenstein inspired for sure.
And I think really it's a lot of fun. Also, there's a couple things. This is obviously not movies technically, but I kind of consider these individual episodes movies. With Black Mirror has done, I think, a lot of good ones of those, particularly like the USS Callister, the Star Trek parody one.
I agree.
I think it's a really great satiric take on video game culture and stuff. But also even Playtest, which was also done by the guy who directed 10 Cloverfield Lane, Dan Trachtenberg.
Yeah, I'm surprised nobody mentioned Doom or the second Doom movie.
In terms of bad ones?
Yeah, good fucking God. Although Doom, the first Doom does have that quick 5-minute first-person shooter scene that is still pretty dope. But you couldn't do a whole movie on that. No fucking way.
No.
But
you know what? Even with like adaptations, I will say someone mentioned Assassin's Creed. I would say that is a bad one, but I find that one more fascinating because I think it has a larger story and context it's going for. It just doesn't accomplish it very well. Because the movie is basically about kind of like, you're being sucked into like a video game too much. And using the Assassin's Creed aesthetic to kind of like represent that. It just has the problem of like it has way too much exposition about the apple and whatever the fuck.
And that movie has a pretty damn good cast too.
Yeah?
And the effects are decent. It's just boring.
Mm-hmm.
Like ultimately it's just a boring movie and it really shouldn't be. Also, dude, the Resident Evil franchise, Goosh.
I would say there's a fair share of those at least I would find fun.
One.
I would argue 3, 4, and 5 are quite fun for what they are.
Oh man, I'll give you 3. Oh, I don't know. I'll give you 3 and 4. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, 5's pretty fun too.
Yeah, I think those 3 are fun. The other 3 are really terrible.
Really terrible. Really, really. Actually, wasn't there 7 of them?
Well, because there was.
I thought chapter 7. Is that only number 6?
I believe that's number 6. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the second one's terrible. The last one is atrocious. The first one I don't hate. I think it's bad, but I still think it's more watchable than, fucking 2 or 6 for
it's
sure.
Not the worst one. Yeah, I would say the last one in particular was the worst one.
Can't even fucking see anything. You can't even see what the fuck is happening.
Nope, not very well. And even in terms of like the inspired things, also we a movie we've talked about on the show, Serenity, a movie weirdly that's structurally very similar to Brainscan. The more I think about it.
Oh fuck! God, that movie. Oh, woof. Yeesh. I completely forgot that was even a thing until you just mentioned it.
Then it came flooding back, though, right?
Oh, instantly, all of it, and it is something else. That's one thing. It's a terrible movie, but I gotta give him credit for just fucking going with that. Like, we're just gonna make this crazy shit and get all these big actors in it. Okay, it was an interesting experiment.
To say the least, yeah. And even, you know what, I would also say there's other adaptations that I would want to like more, but definitely feel like they kind of screwed over, like particularly Warcraft, I think is a movie that has a lot of interesting elements that I think it clearly was like a 3-hour movie that got very chopped down.
Yeah, for sure. Because even with what we got left, I still think it's entertaining enough. I don't think it's good. But
the orc stuff in particular is the effects hold up very well, and the performances, like the motion capture, like Toby Kebbell is the main one.
Yeah,
I think it's phenomenal in that movie. It's another one of those. It's kind of like the Monsterverse, where every time we get away from them and get to the humans, it's garbage.
Yeah, I completely agree with that for sure. And the other ones too, the big 3. Well, I guess you call them the big 3 because there's technically 3 of them, but the Tomb Raider movies. I think the first one is bad, but it's still entertaining. There's enough to it. It's kind of an exciting sort of action movie. The second one's garbage. And the newest one with Alicia Vikander, I really wanted to like it because they do a lot of shit that's straight from the games, especially the new games, as far as some of the action set pieces and everything. And she's pretty good in it. And, it's got Walton Goggins. It's not bad. I'm not going to call it bad, but it's boring. And for a Tomb Raider movie to be boring, I mean, that's sort of the nail in the coffin.
I have not seen any of those Tomb Raider films.
You're not missing a lot, dude.
That's what I've heard, hence why I didn't watch any of them.
Yeah, you're really not.
Though, one that kind of has similar vibes that came out very recently, that's very much video game inspired, is one I know we've both seen, Ray and the Last Dragon, with particularly a lot of the temple stuff.
Yeah,
in that movie has a lot of Tomb Raider-y vibes from the games.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that's a. I mean, it's impeccably animated. I mean, it's amazing to look at. Great voice cast. It's flawed, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And then obviously we have Uncharted coming out with Tom Holland.
I don't know. I won't believe it until I see a trailer, because the movie is cursed.
It's so cursed, and let's put it this way. I'm not going to have any opinion on it until I actually see the movie, because I love the games.
Right.
So it's like I'm sort of going to reserve anything. And then also we're getting a Last of Us TV show. Pedro Pascal as Joel.
I still have a lot of doubts about that working, because that could easily go the way of a Walking Dead. But I think at the very least, there's a bit more of a chance that could work with the source material.
I honestly see it going Walking Dead route as well. I hope not, but I kind of do.
Well, I hope not, in as much as I don't want it to last 55 seasons and have 3 spinoffs.
Oh, it needs to be 2 seasons. Maybe even... Okay, I'll give them 4 seasons. 2 seasons per game, and then be done. Like, I don't want it to go any further than the lore that's already out there. Like, it just, especially if you're focusing solely on those two characters from those two games, like, that's all you need to do, and then be done with it.
Yes, be done with it. Much like the feedback section for the show. Thank you all for that feedback. We also want to thank some other people like Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used for our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Emily Scarda for the art for our show. And thanks, of course, to our loyal Patreon subscribers. All of you patrons out there, we really appreciate you contributing and helping us out. For just $1 a month, and in exchange we give you some bonus podcasts and the opportunity to vote for various different movies that we either do for the show or topics we do for the show. And as you're listening to this, On the Edge of Relevance has a new episode where we talked about our initial thoughts on Godzilla vs. Kong, which we literally recorded moments before we started recording this.
Yeah, for sure. Literally 5 minutes before we started this. Well, we ended 5 minutes before we started this. It's not a 5-minute episode.
No. It was a great... We give you more for your dollar than that. And we should also mention that a poll will be going up this week for all you edgelord patrons to vote on for the badge was for we're doing an episode about DreamWorks animation. And we decided to go ahead and have my bad picks for that particular episode. And the picks you'll be choosing between will be Shark Tale, the infamous Will Smith fish movie, and Shrek the Third, the movie that I would argue kind of started the downturn of the Shrek franchise. Only appropriate given we're talking about the DreamWorks stuff around the time of the 20th anniversary of Shrek coming out. It's been about that long, guys. That's how long you have been all-stars, breaking the mold. But yeah, go ahead and you can vote in that poll. Starting, it'll be the day after this episode drops, so on Wednesday the 7th. But yeah, thank you very much for all your supporters. And also, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at DEDBpod. That's where we posted the feelers about the, asking you what your favorite least favorite things related to whatever topic we do. And you can email us, doublehbill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And, if you want to help support us, but you can't become a consistent patron monthly, why not just buy a bit of our merchandise over at the TeePublic ESO store. There will be a link in the description where you can buy a mug or a tote bag or a t-shirt with our logo on it. Gives us a bit of a kickback.
Buy our merch. Buy our merch.
Music to my ears.
Dance puppet.
Yes, and for more of my puppeteering, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as @NotTheWho'sTommy. And I do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com and also film-cred. This is the last time I'll plug this particular piece, but I know officially that my Godzilla piece, talking about embracing the weirdness of the character, will have been out by this point, and you can read that over at FilmCred.
Hey, there you go. And you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Atom or Adam. It's ATOM_OR_ADAM. Twitter is mostly me just sharing my show, and but I'm willing to share other people's stuff. Instagram is a bunch of other silly stuff. But if you want to find me on there, you want to follow me on either, I'll follow you right back. Why not? Yeah, go ahead and follow me on there, and I'll follow you right back. And and I'll keep my little thing brief this week. But since we're talking about video games, I think it's a good way to talk about escapism. Whatever you lean into to sort of get out of your shell, be it films, books, writing, painting, video games, whatever. Don't ever let anyone shame you for that. Don't let anyone talk down to you because of it. Don't let anyone call you a nerd or say that, you need to get a real life or whatever, because it is a real life for a lot of people. It's very important to sort of have your outlet to get away from yourself a little bit. So indulge it and embrace it.
Yeah, that's very well put.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks a lot.
And also, we should probably mention, you've been on your Letterboxd doing a bit of reviews a bit more as of recent. Typing.
Yeah, I started with fucking Oogie Loves. Oh, Christ. And now it's kind of like, if I watch a movie and I got a quick little blurb about it, actually, most movies that I've rated on Letterboxd since I've done a review, and my Letterboxd name is Schwanson. It's SCHWANDTSON. I haven't changed it to coincide with my Twitter and Instagram because I don't pay for a pro subscription, and that's the only way you can change your name. So there you go. If you want to find me on Letterboxd, it's Schwanson.
I did that, baby. Synergy. And for more of our antics here, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on the ESO network, why not dig into all the other great shows on there? And you can also dig into our archives on our Podbean main feed for a bunch of episodes even before we joined ESO. And nothing else, if you can't buy a bit of our merch or support us on Patreon monthly for just $1, you can be completely free of any charge and support us by rating, reviewing, or simply sharing the show around to give us more visibility, get more ears out there on the open.
Yeah, anything you can do, we definitely appreciate it, and we will return the favor for sure.
Yes, and now, Adam, it's time to do our picking for next week. Next week, we're doing a topic that we've kind of swam around doing since the start of the show, and I'm very curious and excited for it. We are looking into the large career, not just of a director and writer, but also a producer in the form of George Lucas, who this very year marks 50 years since he started his big film stuff with, just earlier this year was the 50th anniversary of THX 1138.
Yeah, man, the thing is, as much shit as a lot of people talk about him, and I'm even guilty of it, especially when it comes to like the prequel stuff and all that, without a doubt, George Lucas is single-handedly responsible for two of my favorite franchises of all time, with Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and also for many other memories and things. I mean, there wouldn't be The Mandalorian if it wasn't for George Lucas. There wouldn't be all this new Star Wars stuff if George Lucas hadn't sort of laid the groundwork. I mean, say what you will about him, give him shit, whatever you want to do. Fact of the matter is, the man is an auteur, and he kind of is a genius.
He has so many proclivities that are fascinating, but at the same time, he is such a weird, uncharismatic person.
He's such a blank space when he's interviewed. Like, he's like watching paint dry.
For sure. But we have, we're going to be discussing various George Lucas productions. We included stuff he's produced in this. I have the 2 good movies for that. You have the 2 bad for that. And so you've assigned them between 1 and 10 for your choices, the same for mine. And then the other person will pick a number, and that gets us close to whatever good and bad choice we're going to cover for the show. So, for my 2 good choices, Adam, I'm between 1 and 10.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go number 1.
All right. Well, I have at number 3 the movie that I would argue kind of made his career, at least got him to the point where he would get us a Star Wars after that. I have his second directorial feature, American Graffiti.
Ooh, fun. I haven't revisited that in a long time. Excellent. Wow. Good call. Very good call.
Yes, especially it's also the one that feels the most distinctive, like especially the ones he's directed. It's such a weird sore thumb, just like, what the fuck? How did this get here?
Yeah, for sure. What was your other one?
At number 7, I had one that wasn't directed by him, but he did produce it for Lucasfilm and did, I believe, some rewriting in there as well. I have the Jim Henson film Labyrinth.
Oh, okay. I'm glad we got American Graffiti.
Not a big Labyrinth guy?
I never have been. Never have been. I appreciate it for what it is. But, yeah.
Well, let's see if I appreciate your bad choice for what it is. As I pick a number between 1 and 10, I am going for number 6.
Ed, number 8. You have quite possibly one of the craziest movies that also is so problematic nowadays for certain actors and things that happen in it. And it's also pre-MCU. You have the George Lucas produced Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck?
Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck.
That's another one I have not seen in so long. I'm very curious to revisit that one. And also I believe instead of quite, you should have said quack.
You're right. I apologize.
Fit the tone of the
What's
choice.
your eye?
But what was your alternative choice that doesn't quack?
My alternative choice was also a huge box office turd, the animated Strange Magic.
Well, the last movie George Lucas has a credit on. Before he retired
Which
off.
I haven't seen, and I know it's from what I heard, it's a big piece of shit.
I have seen, and it is pretty much a big piece of shit. it's not the worst one he's done, but it's definitely it's a weird note to go out on, but kind of appropriate in other ways. I believe he sold that as it's Star Wars for girls.
Oh, right.
What an insult to little girls out there. But that's the end of our discussion here. And until next time, Adam, it's time to turn off the system, unless it turns you off first.
We're on. Wow.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping for the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.